Over the past 9 years, my team and I have sold over 1,600 homes and over $900 million worth of real estate. And we've been the #1 team in our county year after year. So when I tell you I know what it takes to win a listing appointment, I want you to understand this is coming from a place of real volume and real experience from the trenches. And what I've noticed is that after going on hundreds of these appointments is that most agents lose listings for the same exact reason. And it's not that they are bad at real estate, it's that they show up without a real process. They wing it, they hope it goes well, and then they can't figure out why they keep walking out without the signature while someone else gets the deal. So in this video, I'm gonna walk you through the exact 6-step process I use to win listing appointments, starting from the work you do before you ever knock on the door, all the way through to getting the paperwork signed. If you follow this, you can take it to your very next listing appointment and you're going to feel the difference. Step 1, let's jump in. Do your homework before you even walk into the door. So the first step happens before you ever even set foot in that house. I can't stress this enough. Your preparation is really, really important, and you do this ahead of time. This is what separates the pros from the amateurs. The agents that walk in with confidence are the ones that basically are just hoping for the best and crossing their fingers. Think about it from the seller's perspective for just a second. By the time you show up, there's a good chance they've already done research on you. They've looked at your reviews, they watched your videos, they've seen how many homes you've sold. This is all public information. So they've done their homework on you. And so the real question is whether you've done yours on them. Because if you walk in there and you don't know the neighborhood, you don't know the property history, you don't know anything specific about their situation, they can feel that immediately. And the moment they feel it, they stop trusting you because you weren't prepared. So here's what I do before every single listing appointment. First of all, is I pull the full property history. I want to know if this home has been listed before, what it sat at, whether there was price reductions, whether it expired, if this house was on the market 2 years ago with another agent. I want to know all of these things. I want to know exactly why it didn't sell. I'm going to diagnose it when I look up these listings that were on the market before. This happens before I ever sit across from the seller. Second, I'm going to do a very deep dive on the neighborhood. Every neighborhood is different, and so this really does matter, is to have the local knowledge of this exact neighborhood. I've looked at every active listing, every recent sale, every expired listing in that area, every pending deal, and I can speak specifically to what their competition looks like, what the market is actually telling us right now. Your seller is going to know every single home in their neighborhood that's sold in the last year. You got to make sure you know those comps as well, not just the last 6 months. Either got to go all the way back to a year, because that's going to be the time frame that is in that seller's head. You can explain to them, hey, the last 6 months is all that matters. I get that for appraisals all the time, but you should know what's happened within the last year for sure. Third, I research the sellers themselves. I look them up on LinkedIn, IG, or Facebook. I get a sense of what they do, how long they've lived there, whether they've mentioned anything publicly about where they're going to be moving. You'd be surprised how often someone has already posted that they're relocating to Arizona, and you now know their real deadline before they even tell you. You can learn a lot about somebody, though, researching them online before you ever even meet with. Fourth, I prep my CMA with real context, not just a printout of the numbers. So this is not just some ugly MLS sheet. I want to be able to walk them through a real story about what their home is worth and exactly why the data says what it says. My CMA includes color photos of every comp so that they can see the exact condition and contrast it to their home. You want to make sure you have a really great CMA tool that you use to do this heavy work for you. Don't just use an MLS printout. Don't just print the ugly spreadsheet looking graphs from the MLS. You need to have the color photos from each listing. I'll talk about that here in just a minute, why this matters. Fifth, I have my numbers locked in before I even walk in the door. What I'm going to recommend for a list price, I'm going to focus on a range at the first meeting, establishing a floor and a ceiling, what I realistically think it'll sell for, what my plan looks like if it doesn't move in the first 30 days, and have that completely laid out for them. I'm not figuring any of that out on the fly in front of them. That stuff is already locked in before I ring the doorbell. Of course, the condition is going to massively affect the price I tell them, but that will be within the range of the floor and the ceiling I just talked about. It's also critical to know the average days on the market for that particular price range and the neighborhood. I know if the average days on market are 21 and we're only at 10 days on market, we probably don't have a pricing issue yet, right? Like the market hasn't told us yet that this is overpriced because it hasn't been sitting for a long period. Step number 2, set the agenda, then ask the questions. Once you're actually in the appointment, the first thing that most agents start doing is they start pitching. They sit down, they open their folder of their iPad, and they start going through their stuff. It's like immediate presentation mode. And I understand the impulse, but this is actually where a lot of agents lose the listing before the presentation even starts. By the time you walk in the door, there's a good chance that these sellers have already had 2 or 3 other agents sitting in that same spot doing the very same thing. They've heard the same pitch about professional photos, drone footage, and the MLS, and social media. By now, it's just noise to them. So if you come in and immediately do whatever their agent did, you're not standing out. You're just confirming that you're one of the many. What I do instead is I set the agenda first and sounds something like this. And by the way, this shows I'm in complete control and I am the professional that's driving the process. Not them, me. Today, I want to walk you through the listing process, Mr. Seller. I want to look at the market value together and help you pinpoint exactly how much you would net if you sold. We're going to talk about the timing, goals, and what the sequencing plan looked like for you to move from here to your next home seamlessly. At this point, you've told them exactly what to expect, and you're in the driver's seat as the professional setting the agenda. They don't know what to expect out of a listing appointment necessarily, so you need to tell them this is what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. Very basic, but most agents miss this. Then before you actually pitch anything, you need to ask some questions, and real questions too. I've noticed over the years that agents are very good at talking, they're very bad at listening. You need to put your listening ears on for just a minute and ask some really good questions. Some of my favorite questions look like this. Where are you moving to? There's a lot of personal connection that can be built out of this question. Oh, I'm moving to Texas. Okay, awesome. What's got you moving to Texas? Like, go deeper on it. What's driving your timing on this? Maybe it's retirement. Maybe it's the school season ending, but you need to understand what is the timing and why is that the timing? The why is really important. Have you sold a home before? And if so, what was that experience like? This is going to tell me what their experience has been and whether it was a good one or a bad one. And if it was a bad one, I want to know why. What are your biggest concerns about this process? That's going to allow me to customize what I'm saying to these people and not just give some generic BS scripted listing presentation. I want to make sure I address their concerns through what the conversation we're having. And then you actually listen to the answers. I know it's crazy, but you actually listen, because this is where sellers will tell you everything you need to know about what they actually care about. The agent who takes the time to understand their situation before presenting anything is going to connect with them in a way that the agent who just leads with their pitch never will. I'm going to give you a hint too, and a tip. The seller should be talking most of the time. When they are talking, they're going to feel very good about this appointment. When you are talking, it should be very tactical and to the point, and it should end with some good questions. These questions need to be discussed before you even crack open your listing presentation, and they give you a real opportunity to connect in a deeper level with the seller. I want you to watch their body language when you're talking. If you see their eyes starting to glaze over, that's your signal they're zoned out. You've maybe gone too deep on something. You've lost them, you're in the weeds. Stop talking and ask them a question. Get them back into the conversation, get their energy back up, because if they're glazing over, it doesn't matter how good your presentation is, you've already lost that agreement right there. Step 3, do the walkthrough right. Every listing appointment, you of course do walkthrough, but how do you do it? Well, after the initial conversation, I asked the sellers to take me on a tour of the home. A lot of agents treat this as kind of a break in the action, like something they have to get through before the real presentation starts. That's completely backwards to me. If you're walking through the house, making small talk and waiting to get back to the table, you're missing the point entirely. You're missing information that could completely change your pricing strategy as well, by the way. You're missing trust building opportunities, and you're leaving them with the impression that you're not that interested in their specific home. So during the walkthrough, I'm going to do 3 things at once. Let me walk you through it. First of all, most important, I'm going to build the relationship. I'm going to ask them to tell me more about the house. What do they update over the years that they've been there? What are they most proud of with this home? And what are they going to miss most about it? This is going to build a great connection with them. People have an emotional connection to homes that they've lived in. And when you let them start talking about that, you're building genuine, authentic rapport. Next up, you want to be gathering information. I'm looking for anything that could affect the value, affect my listing strategy, or come up in an inspection later. I want to know about the roof, the HVAC, any deferred maintenance, things like that. I'm spotting these things as I'm going, and I usually call them out as I see them, and I'll tell you why I do that in here in a little bit. I'd much rather find out about issues now than have them blow up the deal 3 weeks after we're under contract with a buyer. And the third thing is I'm taking notes. I'm writing things down, or I'm using my AI recorder the whole time because sellers notice that. What it communicates to them is that you actually care about their specific home. You're paying attention and you're going to remember the situation. Sellers are impressed when you have an attention to detail with their house. By the time we get back to the table, my approach has already been adjusted and customized based on what I just saw in the conversation we just had. You don't finalize your strategy until you've actually seen the property. But real quick, before I get into step 4, if you want to go deeper on the lead conversion side of things, specifically what to say when you're talking to these sellers on the phone and trying to set the listing appointment in the first place, we have a 58 module masterclass that's linked below. It's the exact frameworks and language patterns that we've used across all 1,600 transactions we've done. So go check that out when you're done with the video. All right, let's get back to the listing appointment. Step number 4, present different than everyone else in the room. Now we get into the actual presentation itself. And here's the challenge. Every agent who walked in that house before you had a version of the same pitch. They talked about professional photos, drone footage, a marketing plan, their sales stats. Sellers have heard it and they're expecting to hear it again from you. Most agents walk in and present forward. They say, this is what I'm going to do, step 1, step 2, step 3. But when you do that, everything you're describing is theoretical to the seller. You're asking them to imagine what it could be like to work with you. What I like to do instead is start with the market analysis. I get them look at the comps and ask them to how they think their home compares to those houses. That's why those color photos are so important. We use Cloud CMA, by the way, as our CMA tool. It's cheap, it's under $50 a month, and it works really, really well for creating your CMAs quick. But sometimes they are very realistic and other times they're totally out to lunch. But either way, this gives me a chance to evaluate how realistic the person is going to be and how objective they are when I ask them how their home stacks up to each one of these comps as I go through the pages with them. At the end of the market analysis, I walk them through the average days on market, the average list price, the average sales price, and this gives them a much more clear idea on where they stand. I'm framing really where the price should be for them and helping them discover it instead of just telling them at the beginning. After that, we jump into our listing guide and I walk the seller through our proven 4-phase approach to selling homes for the most amount of money with the least amount of stress. Right in phase 1, which is the planning and prep phase, by the way, I talk about how the first step is to decide to work together and sign a listing agreement. We can talk about that today. I always mention this really early on in the listing presentation. I want to make sure they know that before we go forward, we have to sign that listing agreement. I'm going to ask for the close at the end of this, and I'm going to ask for them to sign. I go through each of the 4 phases though, the prep phase, the going live phase, the active listing phase, and the contract to close phase, making sure they know what to expect at each step along the way. As I go over this information, I am also explaining our marketing and sales plan as we go, making sure they know what most agents do and what we do extremely differently. It is extremely important to have a USP, and that's a unique selling proposition, okay? What is the proposition that you have that's different from everyone else that they've met with? You need to think through what this is going to be. This is really a business planning question that should have happened way before you even got to this listing appointment. It should include how you prepare homes for coming to the market, how you take the stress off the seller, what your proven process looks like, and your marketing plan that is different from everyone else. And I have a news flash for you. Listing the home in the MLS and doing an open house is not a marketing plan. You need to be much more creative and strategic than that. That is not marketing skill whatsoever. All right, let's get to step number 5. You got to price it right and hold the line. The pricing conversation. This is the most important conversation of the entire appointment, and it's also where I see a lot of agents make a mistake that ends up hurting both them and their client. Here's what usually happens. The seller has done their research, they've been on Zillow, they've talked to a neighbor who sold down the street a couple of years ago in a totally different market, and they've come in with a number in their head that's probably higher than what the data supports. And when you come in with a lower number, even if your number is right, you feel like the bad guy in the room. And let's be totally honest, a lot of agents buy the listing. And when I say buy the listing, what do I mean? Well, I mean they put out an artificially high number just to get the deal secured, knowing that over time they can ask for price reductions. Totally unethical in my opinion. Like if that's you as a real estate agent, unsubscribe from our channel, don't watch my videos. You're not the person I want to talk to or help. But if you're that ethical agent, and I know you probably are, you're going to be honest and upfront with them about their house is truly worth. You're going to have that hard conversation on why that's the number. Not just going to put an artificially high number that you think they want to hear. And a lot of agents just go along with the seller's number because they don't want to lose the listing. But overpricing a home to win the listing is one of the worst things you can do for a client. The first thing you have to get out of your head is the assumption that top price is the single most important thing to the seller. It simply is not for everyone, but you don't know until you ask them what is important to them. If you price it wrong, the home sits. So figure out what is most important to you about selling your house. Maybe it's that it sells fast. Maybe that it sells for the most amount of money. Maybe it's that they have the least amount of stress. Whatever it is, you got to ask that question. But price reductions start happening when you overprice a home. And by that point, it's already been stigmatized and the seller ends up netting less than they would have if you just would have priced it right in the first place. We call this chasing the market on price. You never want to be in the spot as an agent, and your seller sure as heck doesn't want to be there either. So what I do is walk them through the data and get an agreement on price range before I leave. I'll say something like this: based on the market and everything we've looked at, we have a floor of X and a ceiling of Y. We don't need to finalize the price today. And in fact, we don't want to do that until the final 48 hours before we come to the market, because the market is dynamic and the price could be higher or lower depending on when we actually come live to the market. So once you say this is going to take the stress of this meeting down a notch. Most agents are trying to pinpoint a number while they're there. You're giving them a range of numbers, okay? This is really important concept. Once we've got the photos back though, we can see the staging, we can see the work completed that we talked about, and we can see the condition, and that's when we hone in the price. I'll do a full market analysis again for the seller. We can hop on the phone and I'll walk you through it, and then we'll pick the price to go live at. We do this about 48 hours before we go to the market. I get them to agree on the range first. That's the checkpoint. Then I can firm up the exact number, but I'm not leaving that appointment without alignment on where the market actually is. If they push back, I stay in the data. I don't fold. And this is when I bring up any issues I saw in the walkthrough. If I see condition problems, I'm going to remind them, and this is a key phrase I want you to write down. Top price requires top condition. And Mr. Seller, I saw XYZ in your house that is not top condition. So you cannot expect top price. Are you willing to fix all of these things I noticed to get top price? And some sellers will, and some sellers won't. But that simple phrase, I'm going to say it again, top price requires top condition, makes simple sense to people. Well, of course, every seller wants to do nothing and make the most amount of money, but that's not reality. So when you say that, it grounds them back out to how this actually works. If you want the most amount of money for your house, you need to be willing to make sure that you bring your house to the best possible condition. I walk them through exactly what happens to homes that are priced above the market and the showings that slow down, the days that markets start climbing. It's a disaster you don't want to be in. It's a tailspin. Then of course, the first price reduction happens, and by the time the price gets to where it should have been on day one, you've lost all the negotiating leverage. So pricing it right out of the gates is really important, not chasing the market. I also always explain that buyers shop by comparison, and if your home is priced higher than other homes that are similar, the buyer is just going to simply move on to the next home, put an offer on that house. They're not even going to put an offer on your place because they don't think you're going to be realistic about the offer and what it's actually, the home could actually be worth. Then on the commission conversation, I don't back down either here. I'll say the concern I have for sellers who want to hire an agent who can't even negotiate their own compensation is this. If the agent won't protect what they bring home to their own family, how confident are you they're going to fight hard for your equity? This gets the seller questioning these other agents that are discount agents. Well, if these agents are willing to negotiate so quickly with their own money, how are they going to treat my money? It's a really important frame for people to understand. But the agent who drops their commission the moment you push them is the same agent who's going to ask you to drop your price the moment a buyer pushes them. That's not who you want negotiating the biggest financial transaction of your life. I simply don't negotiate commissions, and I state that very clearly. If they have an agent that will do it for less, we start comparing marketing plans and what we do versus them, and we also compare and contrast our track record versus their track record. I like to remind them that for most of my clients, their home is their single most valuable asset they have, and they want to make sure they're getting aggressive representation by an experienced agent that's done this hundreds of times, not the new guy on the block. Or would they rather take a chance on the new guy or the discount broker that won't market their house or that won't return their phone calls, or that's maybe been through this a handful of times versus hundreds and hundreds of times? Important questions to ask. It's kind of like hiring an attorney. Do you want the associate or do you want the partner at the firm? Well, I'm looking for the clients that want the partner. They want the best of the best and they're willing to pay for it because they know it's going to make them the most amount of money at the end of the day. It's going to net them more at the end of the day, cash in the bank, than the discount person. Step 6, ask for the business and know how to handle what comes back. All right, as the last step, I want to be really direct about this one because I think it's where a huge amount of business gets left on the table by agents who have actually done a really strong job up to this point. After a good appointment, a lot of agents will wrap up and say something like, well, take your time, think it over, and reach out when you're ready. And then they walk out without asking for a commitment. What happens next is the sellers talk to the next agent. And if that agent asks for the business and you didn't, guess who gets the signed listing? At the end of every appointment, after I've gone through everything, I close. It sounds something like this. Mr. Seller, based on everything we've talked about today, do you have any questions or are you ready to move forward? That's it. Okay, I'm going to say it again. Mr. Seller, based on everything we talked about today, do you have any questions or are you ready to move forward? You ask that question, and then this is the most important follow-up. You shut up. You stop talking and you don't fill the dead space that follows. Just ask the question and let the silence linger. The seller is typically going to say, yeah, that sounds good, let's do it. Or they're going to say, oh, I'm not quite ready. And then we're going to have a deeper conversation. Now, when they say they need to think about it, most agents hear that and they back off. That's the wrong move, because I need to think about it is almost never the real objection. They have unanswered questions you haven't addressed yet. It's just a polite way of saying there's something they haven't told you yet. So what you need to do is go back through the appointment piece by piece and get an agreement at each checkpoint. Here's a couple things to ask. When we talked about pricing the home in the range of X to Y, does that make sense to you? Yes. Okay, so we agree on the price range. Were you comfortable with how our process works and what the timeline looks like? Yes. Okay, so you're good with our process. Obviously, it's proven, it's worked hundreds and hundreds of times, over 1,000 times. You're good with it. Great, check that box. Is there anything about working with me specifically that you're unsure about? Well, no. Okay, just ask that question. If there is, you got to talk through it, right? But when you walk through it that way, you'll almost always find the real concern sitting somewhere is in that list of questions. I've had sellers tell me they need to think it over. And when I worked through it like that, it turned out that a friend of the family was also a real estate agent, and they felt like they owed her an interview first. That's a completely different conversation than pricing or process. I would never known this. I would never know how to address it if I had just accepted, well, think about it and walked out the door. Once you know the real objection, you can actually, deal with it. You can address it. And then when you ask again, because until they've signed, you haven't closed, you can actually get the listing signed. But you've just really had a nice conversation if you don't get them signed while you're there. Your highest chances of signing a listing are when you're face-to-face in person. So I'm always going to ask for that signing right when we're there. If for some reason I can't get it, I'm going to follow up, next day, and then 3 days later, and then 5 days later. Like, I'm very aggressive in my follow-up if I know their time frame is going to be fast. So now there's one last thing that I didn't get to in this video, and it's actually what separates the agents who get great reviews and a ton of referrals from the ones who win the listing and then quietly lose the client. It's what you do in the first 7 days after they sign. Most agents get the paperwork done, and then they go quiet. And the seller, who was already anxious about this whole process and stressed out, they start wondering if they made the right call. There's a video on this channel that breaks down exactly what I do in those first 7 days to make sure my clients feel taken care of from the minute the ink is dry. And it's the kind of thing that directly determines whether you get a 5-star review at the end and exceed expectations, and a steady stream of clients and referrals follows, or if you never hear from that client again. Go watch that one next. We'll link it.